Hello, it's Julian. It's March 28th, 2016. We are in Camas again, or still. I wanted to talk a little bit about Easter, since it has been Easter weekend. Today would be Easter Monday. So last night, around the table, the dinner table, we talked a little bit about Easter. I wanted to share a few of those ideas, so a few of those thoughts. So during the week of Easter, Jesus did a lot of amazing things. As he hung on the cross, he mentioned the words, "It is finished." Those are very significant words. He wasn't finished. He had many great things he had yet to accomplish. But his earth life was closing right about then. So he had yet to be laid in the tomb, and his spirit then left his body and went up into the world of spirits. And while he was there, he organized missionary work for those who had passed away already. So everybody gets a chance to hear the gospel. And then, of course, the event of all events, the greatest story ever told, he was resurrected. That is an amazing story. So he has yet, even after the resurrection, some great things yet to do. He will present us to our Father. And if we have followed him and taken advantage of the atonement, he will be our advocate with the Father and say that he has paid the price for our sins at that time, and then the great judgment comes after that. I have an interesting experience with the tomb that I wanted to share. Some years ago, Jennifer and I were background actors for the church, and the church was creating a lot of Bible videos and created a big set out in Goshen, Utah. They built a Jerusalem out there, and lots of events of Jesus' life were filmed there. So one time I was called to go and participate in the filming of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. That's a pretty nice story. So we got there on time, maybe a little early. They got us all in clothes and makeup, and then we went out to the area where we were going to do this filming. And they had created a tomb in the side of the mountain. And they had already filmed Jesus in the tomb, so they were going to reuse the tomb for Lazarus' story. So I walked up somewhat close to the tomb, and I just looked at it. And as I looked at it, I began to ponder. And I was just pondering. The whole area is very spiritual, but when you're there dressed in time era clothing, you kind of feel like you're more part of that story. So I was in that mode, just pondering about the tomb, just wondering about it. And all of a sudden, the Spirit came, and it kind of surrounded me with a witness that there really was a tomb in which Jesus was laying, and that he really did rise on the third day. The Spirit bore such a sweet yet powerful witness to me, and I don't know why, that those things were true. It was just such a beautiful moment as I basked in the warmth and love of that witness from the Spirit. And so now I can tell you, it is true. He did rise from the dead. And I love that Easter story. And now I have my own words, my own witness. Not having been there, I have my own witness as if I were there, that he did rise from the dead. And because he did that, he won the victory over death. He had previously won the victory over sin in the Garden of Gethsemane. So in the garden tomb and in the Garden of Gethsemane, the effects of the fall were overcome by our elder brother Jesus. That's why I love the Easter story. It is the story of redemption. And I am ransomed. I was ransomed. He paid the ransom for me. He overcame death. He overcame sin. Such a beautiful story. My rescue was paid for because of him and his sacrifice and love. So when the Spirit tells you those things, you cannot deny them. You dare not deny them. They're so beautiful, so pure. The knowledge comes in so fast. And it's part of me. You will have those experiences where it becomes part of you. I pray for you to have those experiences, to know as I know. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some conversations I had with my mother growing up. So, as the 10th of 11 children, she was very busy, and it was sometimes pretty hard for her to have those serious conversations. I want to just repeat a couple of them. The first one was when I had the mumps. All of us kind of caught the mumps around the same time. I must have been 7 or 8 because I was living in the West Center house in Springville. And as I mentioned before, I was pretty rambunctious, so I was kind of bouncing around. And somewhere along the line, somebody had told her that mumps can fall from here to your genitals. So your cheeks underneath your cheeks gets really swollen when you have the mumps. And she was worried that I was too active. So she came and she had a very stern conversation with me. I needed to knock it off and rest so that the mumps didn't fall down there. It was a pretty interesting conversation for her to have with me at that age. The next really interesting conversation that we had was the night before I went into the MTC. This was a hard conversation for her. So I was up in my room finishing the last little bit of double checking what I had packed. And she sat on the bed and just kind of held my hand and asked me what I was doing, why I was doing this mission. Obviously she didn't understand my motivation. She wanted to. And she told me something that really, really touched my heart. In the Catholic tradition, each family wants to have somebody in their family become a priest in their church. And she said that as each one of her boys was born, she kept thinking, I hope this one can be the priest. And I remember as a young boy going to the Catholic Church and seeing some of the older brothers help the priest in communion and stuff like that. I never did that duty, but I remember watching them. And so I kind of knew what she meant when she said that she had hoped that they would have that. And then as she's telling me the story, she says, and you are my son, who's going to carry that torch, so to speak. You're going to be the one who is my priest. That was her way of understanding what I was doing in the language that she was used to. So it was a hard conversation for her to have. It was a real good conversation to have for me to tell her why I wanted people to know what I knew. I wanted to share the gospel. And she understood that. So the next morning we she drove me to the MTC, and we had a warm conversation on the way over there. She had a better understanding of what I was doing and why. From that conversation we had that night on my bed. And so she wrote every week on my mission, and I wrote her every week. Actually, I wrote the family, but she was the one that read those letters mostly. My dad may have read them, I don't know, and some of the siblings may have read them. But I was writing knowing that she would read, and that she would probably write back based on what I had written. The third conversation we had of real importance was when she was in the hospital on the last chapter of her life. One of us, Jennifer or I, were trying to spend time. We wanted to be with her all the time, so one of us was usually there. And so I was there with her, and she was talking about this was indeed her final chapter. And she talked about wanting a blessing. The last several years of her life, I was able to give her a couple of priesthood blessings at her request. And as we were in the hospital talking, she talked about that, having a blessing. And then she said something really, really interesting. She talked about her sister-in-law, who had been really a pest. My dad's sister, Amelia, had been really harsh and somewhat mean to my mom over the years, and my mom had resented a lot of the cruelty. So we're sitting there in this hospital room, and she kind of folds her hands and closes her eyes and says, "I forgive her." That was a beautiful moment for both of us. She was teaching me, and she was preparing herself while she was there that last few days. She needed to go to the bathroom a lot. It was hard for her to get up and walk, so I said, "I'll pick you up." And she had lost quite a bit of weight in those last few years, and so I would pick her up right out of the bed, carry her like a child to the restroom and set her down, and then she would go to the restroom, then I'd come back and pick her up and take her back to her bed. And she kept saying, "Oh, I'm too heavy," and all this. I said, "No, Mom, you carried me when I was little. It's my turn to." And I'm glad we had that time and those conversations.